Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for attending the last session of BAC Talks. I'm Denise Rush, the Dean of the School of Interior Architecture, and this evening we have three distinct presentations on the emerging workplace interior architecture technology, and our guests this evening are Felice Silverman, Principal at Silverman Tchaikovsky Associates STA. We have Marcus Hamlin, Senior Designer at Gensler, and Alexandra Haslet, a recent graduate from the MIA program here at the BAC. I will let each one of them, as they begin their presentation, say a little more about them. My brief intro was super short, so they can say something that they want to say. So we're going to start with Felice, and then we'll go to Marcus, and Alexandra will be last. And after each presentation, we'll have a few moments to take your questions in the Q&A box. And then at the very end, we'll take more questions. So here we go. It's all you, Felice.
Thank you. Let me get a minute to share my screen here. All right. Well, thank you to the BAC alumni and to the BAC for inviting me to participate today in this grade. I've caught some of the presentations along the way, and it's been such an exciting day of a lot of innovative technologies and really different perspectives on the whole field of technology. I'm going to take this in a little bit of a different direction and talk about a little bit about how technology has impacted my firm, our firm, and particularly over the last year where things have been changing a bit, and open up the conversation to hear what others have experienced as well. So just a little brief intro on who we are. Silverman Tchaikovsky Associates. We are a just about 25-year-old interior design and architecture firm in Boston, and our speaking of technology, there we go. We are comprised of a mix of architects and interior designers, many of whom are from the BAC, both students and alum. And our work comprises a whole range of different project types, everything from workplace, including different market sectors within workplace, incubators, co-work spaces, all levels of nonprofit, for-profit, lab spaces, restaurants, recording studios, nonprofit spaces, and many spaces for children as well, just to name a few. And what I'd say is that, technology permeates all of the design of all of these different types of spaces. So, it's something that we're thinking about in everything that we design. And so here's kind of a high-level series of sort of topics that I think are most salient to the interior design, to technology in interior design. So collaboration and equity. Technology can really expand how we work, and inform work process, and figure out how we involve broader teams and users to work together. Technology creates smart spaces, flexible, smart, intuitive, universal environments. Technology impacts wellness and supports a range of wellness initiatives, including everything from air quality monitoring, circadian lighting monitoring, touchless commands. Data gathering. Technology is at the forefront of being able to gather and process data that will enable us to understand the performance of a space as well as the use of a space. And so I've always felt that STA is very kind of tech savvy, if you will, in our work process. So here you're seeing some images of virtual reality. We incorporate virtual reality in our day-to-day practice, both for our internal team and design process as for our clients. We use 3D point cloud scanning, FARO technology for documenting all of our existing conditions and building assessments. We've even worked on projects where robots have been painting walls. We have some very innovative clients in that end. And I know you had a presentation earlier on the wild. It's something that we've looked at and had a demo of and are quite interested in as well. So for work process, it's always been something that we've been very much kind of, I think, on the leading edge of being aware of what's out there, incorporating it into our practice. Sorry, there's a little bit of a delay there. But where I would say that we have not been maybe leaders or using technology in the practice is in how we collaborate with our clients and how we collaborate with one another. I mean, this was more the norm of how we work together. The sticky notes, the sitting across a table, the working together over traits and materials and everything, and really kind of hands-on collaborative process. Very non-tech, very low-tech process right here. And then our office itself was also very much like that, very lively, very loud, people jumping up constantly and talking to people at other desks and meeting and collaborating. And then 2020 happened and our office looked like this, like everybody else's, right? An empty space, no people in it. And all of a sudden, overnight, we had to figure out how do we bring everything that we're doing in the office face to face, that whole process, home. And as many of us went through, we asked the question, how do we use technology not only for productivity, but to capture the energy of collaboration and culture? And that to me was the hardest part of this. So I know you're all zoomed out, but enter the Zoom room. This became a critical way of working together. I mean, it's something that we knew nothing about ahead of time. As I said, we were, with being one office, we were not working remotely at all, or really even collaborating remotely with our clients. Everything was in person. So finding a technology that at this point, I know doesn't seem groundbreaking, but a year and a half ago, it really was really critical to workflow. And, having gotten used to it and starting using it as a day-to-day, element for both our work and life events, we'll learn some things about it that I think are what we want to think about bringing back into the physical environment when we can. And that is that this platform enabled us to involve a lot more people into a meeting, to bring a lot more people into the discussion. And quite honestly, it created this very kind of equitable, low hierarchy or non-hierarchical environment, which had so much value to how people communicate together. So it was a real plus learning how to use that, and something that, again, I think when we are physically back in space is going to be an important thing to think about. Another great example here is construction site visits. Imran recently went on a construction site visit and through Zoom brought the entire process back to the office. We couldn't take the whole office to a site, but here we are able to kind of experience and learn about a site doing this. It may seem obvious now, but a year ago it was not something that we even thought we could do. Collaboration has been really, really awesome working with clients over this. It was another thing that I was worried, how would we do this? And using tools that we were already familiar with, but not using on a day-to-day basis. Google Docs, right? I mean, everyone uses it, but this is using Google Slides, where working with our clients collaboratively. Here I am working with on a finished board with one of our clients for a restaurant project, and does it replace being face to face across a table with those materials and all those images? No, but in a way, in some ways, it's better. I mean, in some ways, we have more access to more information, more spontaneous meetings, and again, a more inclusive process that we can invite people into this process whenever we want. So now, as we're talking about going back, and this is something that we're, actively working on with our clients as well as with our own team. It's time to think about going back, and we're doing that in little steps. But how can the technology facilitate the transition to the physical space? But also, how can we take what we learned through this process? And I've shown you a few kind of small examples of how it benefited us to have a new technology. How can we take that into our process going forward? And so we'll go back to the principles that we talked about before. We need to integrate what we've learned about collaboration and equity through our tech tools and create spaces that support a hybrid environment. So we're going to have to think about, as interior designers, the types of rooms, the acoustics, the conference room technology that might make this whole process more seamless, proper microphones, simple little things, but things that make that space, virtual and physical, equitable. Integrating smart technology into the workplace to create adaptable, flexible environments. We're all envisioning that when people come back to the office, it's very unlikely that they're going to be at fixed desks, right? And there's going to be this floating and this moving around space freely. And so to manage that, smart spaces can help that. And also, how many of us have now gotten quite used to at home, Alexa or Siri doing things around our house? When does that come into the workplace? Tech assistance is more of a regular process as well. The wellness technologies were there before. They're more important now. I think people are rightfully so looking for that in space, and we can really track and keep people safe with certain technologies, touch-free, etc. Again, gathering data is critical in this time, both for understanding the performance of a building, but also evaluating space needs and usage. And then I truly believe that the space can be, that the technology can help foster culture in both the collaboration virtually and in person. So I'll leave you with just a couple of thoughts about the importance of integrating technology. Consider technology from the beginning. It's really part of our programming process. It is something that is only effective if we're using it as part of the programming. Talk to our clients about their needs from the beginning. Technology allows us to rethink work and collaboration methods. We're applying what technology allowed us to do in the remote experience. So much we experienced and learned that we can now apply to the physical environment and virtual. Always be open to new technologies, but always being aware of jumping on new trends and jumping on the next greatest thing, because as we know with any workplace design or interior design at all, one size does not fit all, right? It's part of programming to understand the technology solution for that particular user's needs. Overall, it's about adopting a technology mindset as we're thinking about space, and always remembering that technology should be about enhancing people's lives. So I'll leave you with that.
Great, thank you, Felice. I don't see any questions in the Q&A, but I would like to ask a question of you in terms of this past year and you being principal of your firm. Are your clients coming to you with preconceived ideas of technology, or even technology that they're using that they want you to implement, or do you find yourself introducing new technologies to them?
It's a little of both. And I think it's such an interesting moment to be having this conversation, because I think if we were to have this conversation in 6 months or a year, it might be different. But I think I'll go back to the point of really assessing the needs of the client at this moment and helping them vision not only the technology solution, but what their overall goal is for returning. I've seen clients swing so far on the pendulum of saying, we're going to stay completely remote forever and give up our office space, to we're going fully back, no one's going to work remote, and everything in between. And so it's really guiding people through that conversation on so many levels, not just on the technology piece, but on so many levels. But what we are definitely seeing is people looking to us to help them with what I was talking about, is how do you take, what is, a very likely scenario, people working at home and working in the office and still communicating this way, right? Partially digitally, and make that a space. What is the space that creates the most optimal environment for that? So that's what we're seeing a lot of questions coming from, and particularly around the sensors as well. That's another big one that we're seeing a lot of interest in.
Thank you. We have one more question from Sarah Redmore. She's wondering if you did show some Google Slides of your presentation board, mood board, and things of that nature. How do you see the future of the materials library going forward?
That's a great question. The materials library was the one reason I went into the office, right? And for the first, for the entire 2020, the reason I went into the office was for the library. Now, obviously, we were ordering materials and having them delivered, but there's something about being in the library and searching. But what I envision is, again, a kind of a hybrid solution there too. I think with materials libraries will be reduced significantly, since we are getting used to how to select and order virtually. We're already doing that, but especially now. But what I see as an exciting moment is on something like that Google slide presentation, for example, is working at in a space digitally and with analog at the same time, because the benefit of the digital was they were able to research and search and grab images and grab links and all of that. But we also, if you had that with the material adjacent, I could see that really being a very rich process, while still being able to involve outside people and people remotely and everything. So I'm really excited about the hybrid moment that we're in, because I think that we did virtual well, we did in person well. I think we'll do hybrid beautifully.
Great, thank you. We will go on to the next presentation, which is Marcus Hamlin.
Thanks, Felice, and thanks, Denise, always. I graduated from the BAC in 2014. Back then, it was the Bachelor of Interior Design program. And I was really involved with our student organizations, both specifically, the interior design, and then also the Atelier student government organization. And I really always appreciated that really integrated kind of hands-on experience. And then, of course, my work experience throughout my BAC time as well. I started at Gensler during my last year at the BAC. So I did a degree project and worked full time. And for those students on the call, of course, that's just an incredible feat, and I'm really grateful for that. And my time at Gensler has been mostly kind of revolved around workplace interior design, mostly with tech and consumer products clients. But now our work is continuing to change. We're doing a lot of lab work now, and amenities and hospitality and all kinds of other stuff. And I think something that I've learned during this last year is that kind of no matter the project type, inserting yourself and your personal experience provides, I think it was mentioned, in the last talk about empathy, and and in particular during the last year, understanding that technology can actually kind of help you embrace empathy by connecting with people in a more equitable way. So I want to talk a little bit about that, and into the welcome back to the future of the office. Of course, we don't necessarily know what that is, but we took some time this last year, as specifically I'm referencing some stuff we looked at as a studio, and then larger in the firm, just exploring what could be. So Art Gensler, who passed this last year, really instilled this human-centered, people-centered design process. He understood that building space was for people, and looking into the future as we integrate technology and create new space types that Felice was referencing, and it's really all about people. And during March. For me, March 12th of 2020 was when work and place were completely uncoupled. And for most of us, except for essential workers and those, who were kind of integrated into our healthcare system, and others, for those of us who work office jobs, they were completely divorced and separated. And, in a lot of ways that was terrifying, especially no materials library, as Felice mentioned. But there's also been an incredible amount of autonomy that I've gained, and just completely pushed me and my design process in places that I never would have thought possible. But also during the last year, whether it was in this virtual world or just out in the real world, we all felt very bombarded. Rules and regulations, and having to rethink, and having to not hug people, and having all of these aspects of society that in a lot of ways took away our humanity, and created a lot of anxiety. And because of that, and because of social unrest and our reckoning with racism and this country, we were asking a lot of questions. how can the workplace support resilience and combat climate change? How does technology play a role in that? We'd have no more time to waste. Something that became apparent during this time was like we bring our whole self to the office, even if we have our professional black attire on, like all of us presenters have, if you haven't noticed. We're still human beings. We bring our anxieties, we bring our experience, and how can the environment embrace and celebrate that? How do we plan for the future? How do we plan for the hybrid world? What even is that? And how can our current situation inform a more just and equitable experience? And so I just want to share kind of, we did this like really cool kind of exploration of what we thought the future of the workplace could be. And I think this was about a year ago, maybe a little, I think like last May. So I have like 4 examples here. Alfred, who some of you may know, he is a design director, now our design strategy director in our office. And he explored the workplace and the idea of flow, and that, last year in particular, everything was about boundaries. But moving forward, he loves the idea that the space will support flow, specifically as an individual. It'll, the workplace will be welcoming, intuitive, allow them, especially in the creative fields, a space for your mind to wander, but also for your body to recharge and rejuvenate. Victoria, one of our other design directors, explored the idea of integrating outdoors. That's another thing that we've kind of has happened during this time. Is yes, I was in virtual land all the time, but I could also just go out on my porch at any point in time and enjoy a lunch or a coffee outside. And how do we really embrace our hunger to be connected with nature in the workplace? Amanda, a technical designer, talked about coming back to a physical environment with space for flexibility, to think creatively and openly, movement through a variety of communal spaces, to make connections with colleagues. And as we've learned, the physical connections and the virtual connections need to be equitable. And then finally, I really kind of tried to break apart my entire thought process of what the workplace used to be with hierarchy and things. So I looked at, how do we embrace the feminine influence? How do we kind of balance this tactile experience and a digital experience, and really create a fresh, bright, exciting space, but also that feels intuitive. And just some brief findings, that we found. And we did a couple of workplace surveys, which all used to be about the workplace, but now is really the work experience. But we found that there is a percentage, 19% of folks want to work from home full time, while over half want to have some sort of hybrid model, and the other third want to return to the office. But no matter their percentage, there's going to be some sort of mix. And so the design of the workplace, for it to be optimized for collaboration, connection, visceral human experience, is more important than ever. We were only really able to be successful in the virtual world because we had real relationships with one another. And so, how do we prepare us for the future on that? Technology is been an important tool, and it will always be an important tool, but it's not a foolproof replacement for in-person engagement. So we must consider both. So just briefly, how do we use technology to create a better workplace for all? I have 2 examples, just with short videos. The first is Delos International Well Building Institute, where we integrated technology to really embrace and encourage wellness. And then an exploration we did called Workplace with Heart, which talks about the inclusive, connective, and unmuted workplace. So I'll share here. Great, and our other one here. Great. Yeah, so I would say, lesson learned, so to speak, for, this last year is that while technology is going to be an incredibly important, like I said earlier, it must be centered around the human experience um, and it must be utilized in order to create an equitable work experience. And that's certainly going to be kind of a whole new lens that I, design workplace and other projects through moving forward.
Great, thank you, Marcus. Let me take a look at the Q&A. I had the full screen. I was really lost in the presentation. So let's get back to some of the questions from the audience. Are the videos that you shared are they posted online, or are they totally internal to Gensler?
They're online. I could put the links in the chat.
Oh, that would be great.
Yeah, they're just on Vimeo, but they're fully public.
Okay, great, thank you. One question that we have from Susan Shepard is, can you give an example of a way that technology can support company culture? So you showed a great example with Delos and their particular company culture. Can you shed some light on that?
Yeah, well, I mean, Delos is just all about wellness, and so those integrations of technology just really help to visualize and sort of share that experience. But I want to share like a really real experience of my own here, working in Dorchester for Gensler over the last year. And something that we've integrated during this time are really open conversations, about what's going on in the world, about race, about equitable design, just about overall topics of design experience. And we've actually utilized Miro to have super interactive kind of live discussion visioning sessions that replace the kind of overall town hall. But what's really amazing about it is that while we could have, we could speak to one another and people could like shout out ideas, those who were more quiet, who maybe didn't feel comfortable speaking out could, add a little post-it note of an idea to what we were talking about. And we could bring that up, and it was a much more way of integrating introverts and extroverts into the conversation. We're really, really interested and want to continue that, because it's scary to stand up in front of 150 people, even if they're your friends at work, just because, some folks aren't as comfortable. And I would say that's enriched our culture in ways that I never would have thought would have been the case.
Great, thank you for that. We will move now on to Alexandra, but I also want to remind the audience that you still type your questions in, and when Alexandra's finished with her presentation, we'll have additional time for questions and answers. So thank you so much. It's all you.
Thank you, Denise. Okay, so my name is Alexandra Haslet, and I'm a recent graduate of the BAC at the MIA program of 2020. And I actually graduated virtually, which was its own digital experience. But I'm also an interior designer at Ingenuity. And I'm going to talk about my experience with technology, interior architecture, and the decentralized workplace on a personal note. And while there are many pros and cons of this digital era, one of the real benefits is the speed and production of digital content. But with that, there is a lack of feeling, a lack of evoking an emotional response, which I'll talk about. So with the rise of digital dependency within the design community, it's been slow, but steadily increasing over the last 25 years. While advanced technology may have been available pre-pandemic, it wasn't always fully utilized until designers were forced into remote digital world, a scary place for creative thinkers who often rely on physical and tactile. The way we work and learn has changed since the pandemic started. Design mentorship has been slow to adjust to the digital platform. This has created a world where job candidates who have a background in certain technologies or don't have a background in certain technologies like Revit and AutoCAD have become nearly unmarketable. Zoom has become a standard part of our vocabulary, with the expectation that nearly all client meetings will be held on a virtual platform. So what other changes have we seen with the onset of this digital era? During the pandemic, I changed jobs. The process is a great example of how the design world has changed on a micro level. My interview was over Zoom. And before the interview, I started panicking, thinking about all the things that I might miss out on having a virtual interview. One of which was, no one would see my fantastic ensemble. And my body language wouldn't be caught. And there's a lot of just small cues that we rely on in person. And unfortunately, things like an icebreaker aren't easy over a virtual platform. The beginning of a video call can be much more serious than the beginning of an in-person interview. And one of the things that I really would miss is, like I said, the icebreaker. A few years ago, before an in-person meeting, or in-person interview, I was getting out of an Uber, and there was a 2 feet of snow right outside of the Uber. Fortunately, I stepped in it and lost my shoe. And I'll set the scene. I had nude tights on and heels, and I was in such an angle that I couldn't retrieve my other shoe. I was really lucky to have a passerby grab it for me. And honestly, I was very, very stressed after that and a little nervous about my interview, but I decided to use it as an icebreaker, and it really calmed my nerves, and I wasn't as stressed, and I ended up getting the job. We all had a great laugh about it. including me, and it worked out really well. But that's something that I missed out on in my virtual interview. I didn't have a commute. My virtual interview, there wasn't much time for an icebreaker. It was kind of a dead start. So although I didn't have an icebreaker, it still went well. I'm working there now. But some things do get lost, and I can say the same for when you're giving your 2 weeks notice on a virtual platform. But before my first day, I filled out my paperwork and I received my new laptop. I met with the office manager as well as the president of the company, Martin Batt. And the next week, I met over 30 of my new coworkers over Zoom, which I must admit is a lot more daunting than it is in person. I mean, 30 people are staring at you through a tiny screen. It's not as casual as it is when you're in person. But one of the difficult things about starting a new job over a virtual platform is it can be hard to get to know your project team, but not impossible. The collaborative aspects of digital work are really transforming the way we do design as a team. Bluebeam Studio, for example, and Microsoft Teams now allow us to all work together in central files like we haven't done before. Where we might have been doing that in Revit for years, working on a central model, we were creating markups, reviewing documents, and assembling presentations in a very antiquated way pre-COVID. Microsoft Teams allows us to now work together as a team in PowerPoint, Word, and other desktop apps, and our colleagues at the same time. A convenience that enhances our workflows and whether we're in the office or not. So even if we went into the office full time, this would still be something that we use to really enhance workflows. But now more than ever, digital elements are far more important when discussing with coworkers, but especially with clients. The hybrid workplace is a promise to blend your home and work life, which comes at many advantages. As Genuity, we've taken a remote digital platform approach, a hybrid model that gives you the option to work in the office or work at home. I worked on a project recently with some extremely tight deadlines. My project team worked together on video chat for days on end. We were laughing after another 2-hour phone call where we're just, working together and sharing screens and, really trying to just streamline the process when you're working on such a tight deadline like that. There's no time to just be messaging somebody constantly. Doing it on video, screen sharing is just the most effective way to work. And so we created a lot of digital presentations for the client, and which we went over Teams. But then after that, we always had the intention that we would also have to create a bunch of presentations, physical boards for the client. And while digital work has really streamlined our workflows, it's also created double the work, which I'll talk about in my next slide. So one of the things that I think everybody's kind of had a hard time with over the pandemic in the AD community is setting expectations with our colleagues, but also our clients. And at the beginning of the pandemic, I think we were all really unsure of what the future might hold, and we worried about keeping our clients happy. So we promised unrealistic deadlines that transform the speed at which we are now working, and sometimes at the expense of our creative process. And while we may be moving into a hybrid model as an office, that doesn't mean our clients are embracing a similar as-needed protocol. I think a lot of us are approaching client meetings with an abundance of caution, unsure of what the preference might be, and yet there are times when, with all the technology in the world, an in-person meeting is just irreplaceable. So, and I'm sure as many of you do, I always worry about the impact of digital images on a client. So how do we bridge the gap in situations like reviewing material finishes? As I mentioned in my last slide, we're doing double and sometimes triple the work to produce digital and physical material boards. where there was a time when we might have only produced 1 or 2 physical boards for an entire project. We're now creating multiple iterations to review digitally prior to mailing the client physical boards. And once the client receives the physical board, we often don't get the benefit of seeing a reaction, which is a real problem if the client doesn't provide an adequate amount of feedback. So the problem is this is really messing with our creative process. A lack of time mixed with the lack of feedback is a creative killer. But there are a lot of real benefits to the way that we're working, especially with clients. In a typical client working session, we use Bluebeam Markup to mark up PDF plans. Screen sharing with live markups is critical in communicating ideas and agreements in real time. And while this digital era is creating sometimes double the work, this Bluebeam markup is really streamlining the way that we do workflows. Screen sharing with live markups allows us to take account of what happened in the meeting in a way that meeting minutes don't really convey, where meeting minutes are done after a meeting and may convey our understanding of strategic decisions, and we occasionally don't get it right and things get misinterpreted. Live markups commenting on the client's directives allow the client to see misunderstandings in real time, saving a lot of confusion and embarrassment when a group of people in the meeting have different opinions or memories of particular events. This is a streamlined approach because if the meeting markups are taking place on the drawings themselves, these in-plan markups can then be immediately used as red lines for the designer that may not have been able to attend the meeting. This process also helps us to reinforce our intentions while also giving us a solid record of changes that need to be made in the design. In summary, a lot of things have changed in the past year, especially with our dependency on technology, but leveraging the right tools and using effective communication with our team members, our clients, and our consultants are all effective solutions to the ever-changing and evolving digital era.
Great, thank you, Alexandra. Let's see if there are any questions in the chat here or in the Q&A portion. So we have a pretty quiet audience. So I will, the students have a few questions generally about how you all handle the use of physical materials and how, what source do you use? How do you find it challenging? Any of you can answer that.
I'll answer. I think one of the things that has been difficult about the pandemic is deciding where materials go. Do they go to my home or do they go to the office? And having changed jobs in the middle of the pandemic, I've done it both ways. For the first half of the pandemic, I had materials sent to my house from Material Bank, typically. I had so many materials at my house. I had entire projects, boxes and boxes, and Material Bank has really made the process of ordering materials so much more streamlined. I can get things especially when our deadlines are so tight now. Sometimes it's really difficult to get things on time, get things at a moment's notice. But with Material Bank, you can literally order something at midnight and get it the next morning before 10:30. And that's something that, we used a little bit before the pandemic, but that we have heavily relied on during the pandemic, especially when we, weren't even going to the post office. We were really staying at home. So I think it's really changed the way that we order materials, handle materials, but also the way that we recycle materials. When we can send them back to Material Bank, really helps reduce waste, and there's a lot of environmental benefits to that.
Great, thank you. We have another question I think this is directed for you, Felice. It's from Christina Oliver, wondering how you handle hiring students and integrating them into your practice since you aren't in the office. And I guess that could also relate to new hires, as Alexandra shared her story of being changing jobs in the pandemic.
Right. It's not easy, right? It's to kind of come into a firm and immerse yourself into a culture when you're not physically there. But we have had several hires over the last year, and I'd love to get their feedback on it too. But we've done everything we can to have them meet. Well, first of all, in terms of interviewing, it's really the same process. I mean, we've been doing a lot of outreach. I've been talking to different student groups and everything, and I've made some connections that way. People have been reaching out to us, and we've met some incredible people that have joined our firm over the last year. Similar process of how we would be vetting it, but then that Zoom interview, no doubt, is not ideal, and we have all kind of, take that into consideration when you're meeting somebody, that this is sort of an awkward platform to be meeting someone on, and try to break the ice. And usually one of my cats joins or something, and somebody laughs, and we kind of go from there. But in terms of integrating, then, I think it's taught us a lot. It's another one of those, I would say, kind of eye-opening pieces of what we had to do remotely and using technology to onboard someone, to integrate someone, not only just learning about all of the systems of our file structures and processes and templates and all that kind of stuff, but also just the meeting everybody. I think because we were remote and we were doing this through technology, we were much more deliberate about it. And I think that we learned some aspects of integrating people into our culture and making sure they met everybody and making sure they kind of knew all those different steps better than maybe we were doing before. We were sort of relying on people coming in and just sort of becoming immersed because they're in the physical space and meeting people that way. And we had to be more deliberate about it this way. So I think that that's one of those pluses that we'll take and do better when we go back into the physical office.
Great, thank you. We have one more question. I'm trying to keep an eye on the time as well. This is from Kyle. Will we see offices return back to the full work week at the office or become hybrid, work from home and office? What's your guess? I guess any of you can take that, but you might have some input, Marcus.
Yeah. I mean, short answer, we don't know, and it will be different for everyone. But I would say, my guess is that if companies are going to do it right, whether it's a giant organization like Amazon, whether it's, a small, firm, or really anything in between, they need to be considering that, again, like I mentioned at the beginning, like you bring your whole self to work. So I feel like before the pandemic, in working downtown and like always being downtown, I left a lot of I left a lot of aspects of my personal life sort of by the wayside, because I was so busy and so worried about physically being in the office. But now, people at every level at my firm and others have recognized that we can be successful and productive. You can integrate new folks fully virtually. So there are no more excuses. And so I think it'll be a mix. I don't really personally ever see myself going back to the office, more than 4 days a week, because there are some days where I need to like expand my work day a little earlier or a little later and include a few errands and a few like personal things, or taking some time to volunteer doing stuff for the BAC or whatever else during the day, and allowing that work day to be expanded or contracted is enabled by technology. And so, if there's any like other firm or company leaders on this call, I would definitely encourage you to really consider how people have been working and what's, how they've been successful, and to really embrace, their autonomy and what might be important to them, in addition to, of course, being successful at work.
Yeah, I'll add on to that and totally agree with you, Marcus. And in terms of, our firm, and I think probably a lot of design, I mean, Marcus, as you said, there's all different types of companies and firms that will handle this differently. But in terms of design and architecture firms, and us in particular, I think we've learned how, like I said before, we've learned how to do it remotely. We've learned how to do it virtually. We know how to do both. We can do it better by figuring out the best of both worlds. In my opinion, if someone's going to come in and work solo all day, on a drawing set, and not be collaborating with somebody because, for that day, that's a really kind of solo task, then there's really no need to be in the office. But when teams need to meet, and we've been kind of experimenting with that a little bit more lately, bringing teams back into the office to kind of have some of that, sort of force some of that, sit down together and meet in just a different way. And seeing whether that's as or more productive or not. And I think we're going to be trying to figure that out, over the next coming months. But I'm quite sure it's not going to be a full-time scenario for anybody. It'll be some level of hybrid. It's just a matter of how we structure it. I've seen some firms saying, oh, okay, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, this group comes into. I don't think that is necessarily going to work. I find that very limiting in a different way. I see something a little bit more fluid and team-based. And then with the right support spaces for engaging the remote people into that process when needed. So it can't be one or the other.
Great, thank you all. Well, we are at 9 p.m. I know we were the last session of the evening. So in closing, if you each could maybe give one quick sentence about the presentation that you gave and the takeaway you want us to have from what you've shared this evening, and then we will end the night. I guess we'll start with you, Felice.
Okay. I guess the takeaway I would give you is just to have a technology mindset. Think about technology as part of the design process early on, not as an afterthought, because there's so much that we as designers, even if we're not experts in the technical aspects of technology, the premise and the goals of what technology can bring to our clients is something that we need to be drawing out of our clients as a program element.
Thank you.
Yes, I will be integrating my technology much earlier, Felice, moving forward, not just post-CD's AV coordination. For me, recognizing that technology, because it is spoken about in the last talk, is fluid. It's sort of ever-changing, literally every day. And so recognizing that not only can technology and integrating it properly into space, into virtual, hybrid, physical space, sort of create possibilities, but I would venture to guess that it's also going to be imperative for us to solve problems that we will be encountering, whether it's directly with our clients or in the larger kind of scope of the world and then the places that we touch.
Thank you. Alexandra, you close us out.
I think one of the most important takeaways I would give is that everybody communicates differently. Sometimes it's hard for people to, fully communicate via text or via messaging. And if you find that you're having trouble communicating with your coworker or client, to try alternative methods, because we have all of the methods now. We have lots of different ways to communicate virtually and in person, but I would just say to be honest about what your needs are and to set expectations in advance. I think it's it's important to over communicate our ideas when we're virtual, because so much does get lost and we forget about that.
Great. Well, thank you all. It was a wonderful session, and I was so glad to see you all on the screen. So that's it. I'm not sure if Eliza's coming back on. That's the end of our BAC talks for today.
Thank you, Denise.
Thanks.
Thank you. Have a great night, everyone.